Hi, I'm Dan Kubisky, co-chair of the International Community of the Society of Professional Journalists. And this is one of our occasional updates on important issues that we've looked at in the past. We're very fortunate today to have with us Vicente Calderon, who is the founder and editor of Tijuana Press. This is obviously, Tijuana is in Mexico, and Mexico is one of the most dangerous places in the world. And that includes active war zones. And so we'd like to get an update from Vicente today about what is happening in Mexico and what might be done. Vicente, earlier we were talking and you said solidarity is a good thing. And I think journalists around the world have solidarity with you and your colleagues and the threats, and we are concerned about the threats facing you. What else should be done besides expressing solidarity?
Don, thank you very much for this invitation. And the main thing here, the easy, rapid answer will be to make this good intention, this solidarity and concrete actions in favor of the situation that many, especially the local journalists, are facing in Mexico, which is increasingly more dangerous, basically every day. And is daily increasing the number of the level of danger, because we still are seeing a huge level of impunity. From the last time that we talked, we have more reporters killed along the Mexican Republic, not here in Tijuana, fortunately, but unfortunately in other cities and states of the country. Right now, we have between 13 or 18, depend who which counting are you following, but between 18 or 13 media workers killed. 13 of those, according to some of the groups that are following and tracking these numbers, are in highly suspicious of being related to his job, and that's what got them killed. So we need to see concrete actions. I've seen solidarity from the European Union. I see solidarity from members of the Congress. I see Anthony Blinken, the State Department head director from the U.S., expressing not once but twice since the last time we spoke, expressing his concern and the country's concern about the situation of journalists in Mexico. But we haven't seen that much of that solidarity converted or become concrete efforts. We did see before some support from different civil society organizations from the US, and in some cases from private foundations helping the reporters. But obviously that hasn't stopped the problem that we are facing here in Mexico.
Okay, when you ask about concrete action, either from the US Congress or from the State Department, I mean, there's a limited amount what they can do. Mexico is a sovereign state after all, and it is a major trading partner with the United States. What steps do you think they can take that would put the pressure on the Mexican government or even the local governments to get away from this impunity, to actually do something about investigating the murders of journalists and to prevent future murders?
That's a good question. And when we say that it's a good question, because we don't have exactly a good concrete answer, but that's what we are trying to find out. And I mean, I'm not diminishing the importance or relevance of the expression of that solidarity. But again, the reality is after all those statements, we are seeing the same level. For example, I would like to see a little bit more direct relationship with the local cases from the U.S. authorities, just to explore, or civil organizations probably, because, for example, in the case of Margarito, one of our colleagues here in Tijuana who was killed, I have heard several times during this morning press conference that the Mexican president has every day, that Thursday is devoted to give the information about the cases of reporters killed, among other public safety issues. And you can see that they are putting incorrect information, just to say the least. In the case of Margarito, we have 3 people arrested as material killers or suspected to be the material homicides, perpetrators of the killing of Margarito, 3 guys. But the Mexican government has said at least twice in different press conferences that their number is about 10. There's a miscommunication there. We can just be precise to really show that we are paying attention about the progress of the investigation of these cases. We know, fortunately, that the alleged or the main suspected to be the mastermind of this particular killing in the case of the photographer Margarito Martinez is already arrested, but he has not been charged with this particular killing. So one of the first things that the U.S. authorities or U.S. representatives or organizations is put pressure specifically in every case, just to keep the pressure along with the local press, my colleagues in every city or state who have been facing these killings, about the progress and to see good results. One of the things I learned in Tijuana through the years, because I was a very rookie reporter in 1988 when I had to face the first killing of one of my colleagues, that in Mexico, when you have political will, you can produce good results. There's great investigators and police officers here in Mexico, even in this difficult environment. And I get the sense that there's some political will to solve the case of Margarito, but we haven't seen it moving enough. Why I say this? Because, for example, since the beginning, we point to the suspicion of this cartel cell of criminals, suspect of his involvement in this killing. And they really were after this particular group or gang. They ended up arresting the leader of this gang in a different city, in Monterrey, Nuevo León, a different state. But again, he has a long previous record of criminal activity. And so far, he's been charged with other cases, but not in the killing of Margarito. So if the authorities help us to put the pressure, it's just give us some coverage. And I don't mean, probably is not coverage the word, but when it is, give us some cover in terms of safety. We are not the only ones talking about that a specific problem with it itself. To be pointed out locally, it's difficult. It's scary because it's dangerous. Yeah. There's the proof of that. So that's one of the first things that it comes to my mind that can be done along with the solidarity. It helps, but you know, also many of you that are following cases in the situation in Mexico, I mean, the response from the Mexican government is to discredit these concerns and to tie it with groups from the opposition to the federal government. So in that sense, we need to talk more closely. So between civil society, the press corps in Mexico, and the local regions, I guess, and the authorities that has expressed their interest to find the ways to make this and more concrete efforts that will be giving us some good results.
Right. You mentioned the president of Mexico has occasionally mentioned the issues. During his weekly press conferences, there was always the hope that he would be talking about this problem. But my understanding is of the 15 or so journalists who have been killed, he's only mentioned 4 and called for action. Do you feel let down by the national government in terms of their...
Yes. Yeah, there's two dimensions for that question, I think, Dan. Yes, I feel down because I feel that we have been left down as a society, Mexican society. Again, as I said, in this country, they kill lawyers, they kill doctors, they kill women. I mean, it's not just reporters. So far, every week on Thursday, when he talks about public safety matters, he talks specifically about the killings and the progress and the investigations related to different media professionals who got killed. So it's becoming a regular occurrence, but he doesn't And the problem is that he is not exactly open about the questioning that he's facing in that sense. Because in some of the occasions, for example, just the case here in Tijuana, in the other killing that happened in Tijuana, Lourdes Maldonado, our colleague, who was killed a little bit less than a week after Margarito was killed in January. One of the main natural suspects is the friend of the president, the former governor of Baja California, Jaime Bonilla, which is now again back to the Senate seat that he was holding before became a governor. And he basically, the president basically absolved Mr. Bonilla before any other investigation done, really, neither by the federal or the local authorities. So I think that's why I say that I feel we are let down, but it's not just the reporters or the press corps, it's the society in general, because when you have reporters showing him leads or some information that could merit some more the specific investigation, he just tend to diminish the relevance of that story, and always saying that when you are criticizing him and his administration, you are working for the opposition in Mexico. So yeah, we are feeling let down, and we need to find a way to work in that scenario.
You had you mentioned how, as society, you were feeling let down. When you were with us in February, we were talking about the importance of free and independent journalism to help better society, to help protect democracy itself, and to help protect the civil society that allows us all to think and say what we want to do and to progress. Are you feeling that the threats, not only to journalists, but as you mentioned, to lawyers and other vital members of society, is this affecting the way people look at how their society is and what their future might be, in terms of a democratic society?
I really do, and it is a very complicated, but not that far away from what you are seeing in the States, with people polarized by not just the media and the reporters, but also the use of social media platforms, and those being used by malicious actors or government or people with special interests. What I mean is, for example, now it's more important to have good journalism, because many platforms who pass by journalism are just basically doing PR for the government. And we are losing, for example, the independent agencies who will be balance between the powers. I'm talking about the electoral authority, for example, which is right now a hot topic in Mexico, because the president wants to diminish the power and the capabilities of the electoral authority, who was one of the main achievements of civil society in Mexico from the late 90s, early 90s, excuse me. For that matter, we need to be able to produce journalism, good stories with balance in with the interest of the public as the main director effort. And for that matter, I see a very difficult situation right now, because the government is trying to push its own agenda and always degrading any option that is not in favor of that agenda. And for that matter, criticizing many of the people who is doing journalism as members of the oppositions or working for the opposition. And that's a very dangerous problem in any country that is trying to become a democracy, as we are trying to make the effort still in Mexico.
We've talked so far about just the physical threats to journalists, but I saw a report that there seems to be a growing discovery of more journalists whose telephones have been hit with the Pegasus spyware. Is this, could you just talk a little bit about these threats to to journalists in Mexico as well, something other than the physical threats, how these threats are expanding on for journalists.
I mean, that's a very important point, Dan, because it's not just the physical threats. This particular case is just the continuation of a strategy used by the powers of being in Mexico, or political powers. And the main thing is that this government told us that they were different than the previous ones. We knew from previous administrations that this particular software has been used to spy on journalists and human rights activists. And what my understanding about this latest discovery is that they know that this government is did buy this software, these capabilities. They haven't been able to prove that they used it, but they know that first that they bought it. This new administration, under the Manuel López Obrador administration, entities or agencies bought this program again. Not that wasn't there before, but they bought it knowingly that this was a big sensitive topic, and that some I think it's one or two journalists and several human rights activists were infected. We don't know, in fact, if they were able to use it yet. We haven't seen proof of that. And even the group that came up with this information is saying that they haven't been able to prove that was being used. They know that they were infected, but they haven't been able to, they used it. But what it means is that this was just one of many pressures that the reporters or the media outlets or human rights group or the opposition in general is facing. And I don't want to link political opposition with journalists, because of course, many of the complaints of the government, unfortunately, are true. For many years, many of the media companies and many high-profile reporters were working on the side of the government, and due to this relationship that we always have been dealing with, we're just pushing more the interests and agendas of the government of other powers. Well, and for that matter, when the president says, well, this particular group is linked to this particular investment or business group who is in the opposition, there's some truth to that. That doesn't mean that all the reporters, all the media outlets are working for somebody else. And that's a big problem, because they are using, the government is using the media outlets or the reporters who are not following the highest ethical standards to attack everybody else. And this just is making easier to anybody else to attack reporters, not just discrediting them, but also attacking them in their prestige, so to speak, and their credibility. And also the next step is in the integrity or even with their lives.
Right. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but with all these threats, physical and cyber and all these threats, why do your colleagues keep moving forward and working so hard to do good journalism in Mexico? Wouldn't it just be easier to quit? Why don't you quit? What keeps you going?
I can speak for myself then. I know that there's a lot of my colleagues who have, because they think it's very important. I do it because I really believe that in this scenario, the possibility of doing good journalism is even more important. Because if you don't do it, you are giving your space that somebody that could be going to the easy route. It's very productive and lucrative to be cozy with the government. They respond nicely to that. But on the other hand, we need to, I have more than 30 years working as a reporter here in Mexico. I have seen that the civil society has made progress. We still have a lot of problems, but we have moved forward and we cannot stop. It's just exactly what you guys are seeing with the democracy that is facing really important challenges in the US. We have a better institutionalized system and there's a little bit more protection, but just remember the case of our colleague in Las Vegas who was gunned down not long ago. So the danger is still there. We are more careful. We need to be more careful. And sadly, I know that there's stories that we are not saying, but when you see others doing that part, and you have seen it's not always government leaks, but it's always good working reporters doing their job. It's an example, and you cannot let them alone. When you see people risking their lives, then when you say, well, maybe I cannot do that at the same level, but I can push it and be like a contention barrier to the other direction that is pushing the effort that is pushing the direction to make us just more quiet. And besides that, what else are we gonna do? I'm a psychologist. I probably can go back, but I really think this is important. And I have family here. My daughters needs to find a better place than the one I found here. And I really believe that this particular area, it's important for a progress both of the US and in Mexico.
And are you getting support from the average person on the street, or are they staying away from you out of fear? I mean, so are you seeing a positive effect in the society for your hard work?
And some level, but again, just like what happens with you guys in the States, there's also people that is really just using the comments of the government and from the president to the local mayors or other authorities to just discredit what we do. So yeah, but this has been the story for us for many years. So the only problem is that the stakes are higher now in terms of physical integrity or well-being. I think people will respond. We need to learn how to deal in this environment. And I think for that matter, it's also more important to be able to do probably, or more ways that we do less journalism, we do less journalism better done. So the stories, we don't get to do many stories, but the ones we want to do it in a more in-depth, in a better context, so people will understand that we understand that we have to survive in an environment of free market, but we are not operating as just a business, just moving by profit. That to do public service through journalism still is the main cause of this profession, because it means well, not just for us, but for society, and eventually for us indirectly.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good tone to end this conversation. Vicente, I want to thank you very much for taking time from your very busy and hectic schedule to provide a short update of what's going on, what some of the dangers are that remain, and some of the things that can move forward to make life better, so that it can be safer for you and your colleagues to work in Mexico. Thank you again. I hope we can have you back one more time, a few more times, to continue update us, and hopefully each update will be a little more positive.
I hope so that too. And I really appreciate your solidarity and your interest, Dan.
All right.